And welcome to the Long Talk, your in-depth, well, not long, your chats with various administrators and players from around the New Zealand sporting world. And we have another fantastic guest today. We have the CEO of Volleyball, Toni-Maree Carnie. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you very much.
So, as you said, we're going to call you TM from now on. Now we've got the full introduction out of the way. How did you get into volleyball?
Sure. Volleyball is one of those sports that I really didn't engage a lot in as a young person. I did the school. I sort of had memories of that as a junior, and it probably wasn't until I actually left school and played it as a social sport of preference with my friend group, and it was a really good sort of sport that you went down, you played in the evening, you went to the pub afterwards, you chatted, you talked, and it was a really good social sport. So that's where I sort of first probably played it a little bit more, and it wasn't until my kids played that I went, oh wow, this is a really good sport, and spent way too much time on the sides of volleyball courts and saw what was going on. And so then that brought me on to the Volleyball New Zealand board, and then into the position that I'm on, in at the moment.
So yes, as chief executive, the beginning, the big boss in charge of everything. Volleyball, for me, from the UK, is a sport you don't see very much, but in New Zealand, it's one that it's kind of basically you go down the beach, you see people playing touch rugby, and you see people playing volleyball. It is part of the culture, and it's of New Zealand, isn't it? And part of the kind of what people just do as a crowd by the beach and having a bit of fun.
Yeah, volleyball could easily be termed a sleeping giant. The reality is that we actually are one of the fastest growing sports in New Zealand, the fifth largest secondary school sport, in fact, and that's mostly people playing indoor volleyball. So it is actually huge, but like lots of indoor sports, you don't really see it, and because it is not right up the top of New Zealand's favoured sports, then obviously it doesn't get television coverage or much media coverage, but in fact 18,000 odd secondary school kids are playing it as their sport of choice. You're right. Wherever you go, it's so easy just to set up either a net or a rope and get a ball. You can play with as many or as few people on either side. You can play in the grass in the park. You can play at the beach, or you can play indoors. So, that's the beauty of the sport. You can play at any place, any time. It's really easy to pick up. And obviously, as far as different generations playing, you can all play at the same time. It doesn't matter if you're 10 or you're 50. You can still play together. And so therefore, it's one of the few sports that you actually have where, multi-generations can actually happily play and engaged.
Yeah, so how much do you get involved with kind of that sort of I guess it's even below grassroots, isn't it? Sort of casual players, and you've got grassroots, and you've got high performance. How does your kind of time split or focus split across those?
Sure. Essentially, we can only work with those that we can influence and engage with. So essentially, if you play what we would term social sports, so ethnic groups, church groups out on the beach, that's certainly nothing that we are able to influence. But what we would always do would be to encourage people to learn more, to upskill, to learn how to coach, to referee, and to contribute further to the game. So that group there we don't really influence, but certainly those who play in sort of social sport competitions through associations and clubs, we try to encourage the same things, take up some coaching, refereeing, help out the next generation, volunteer. And obviously then as you get more formalised, so into playing for your school or playing for your association, representative or New Zealand, obviously that's where we influence quite heavily.
Yeah, and when you say clubs, do you have clubs as sort of clubhouses and stuff, or is it kind of virtual clubs that rent halls quite often? Is more the kind of setup that you guys kind of have?
Yeah, it's pretty much the virtual club. So they will meet together. They'll use a school hall or a school gym or a local community centre they'll train, they'll play, they'll do their thing. They may go off and socialise afterwards, but yeah, basically the sport is run centrally in locations where a whole lot of teams will come together and then play their event and then go back. So there is no bricks and mortar associated with their club. Yeah, absolutely.
And I've seen netball kind of has around places like Stonefields and stuff in Auckland. You've got the sort of netball centres. Do you have similar kind of sort of volleyball centres for hosting sort of multi-team or multi-game tournaments at the same time or on a regular basis?
So we share with all the other codes that are desperate for indoor space. So, we're just one of those groups, those sports that line up behind everyone else and big borrow, facilities. So the reality is that, because as I said, volleyball is a big sport. When we run our New Zealand secondary schools, we have 28 courts going at the same time. And, in fact, at the moment, there's just one facility in Palmerston North that can do that. So the reality is when we run large competitions, there are very few places that we can, actually run our events. So the majority of the large venues are about 12 courts. So, but they are, spaced throughout New Zealand in different locations, and lots of even large cities don't even have that many courts. So again, we just need to try and find venues that we can get as many teams as possible together playing. The reality is that the great thing about our sport is being able to have everyone together, under the same roof. It's a wonderful atmosphere. So we do try and find those spaces, but there aren't that many. And, when councils are looking at buildings, some gymnasium space, and we say, look, we'd like, 30 courts, or they just laugh at us. So, the reality is they're really excited that they're building 6 courts, and it's like 6 courts, just nothing as far as the numbers that want to play volleyball.
So there we go. So, folks, if there's a private investor who'd like to buy sort of 6 or 7 warehouses across the country and convert them into volleyball courts, I'm sure there'll be a lot of appetite for their use. Are you being an indoor sport? Does that make you're kind of you're a winter sport or a summer sport or an all year round sport for that matter?
Good question. So we actually are an all year round sport. So the reality is that our senior secondary schools play term 1, our club and rep play through our winter, so term 2 and 3, and then our juniors, school juniors, play term 4. So but basically runs right across the year. And then of course we have beach volleyball as a separate sort of standalone discipline within our sport, and it probably runs from sort of October to February, March. So that clearly does run through summer, but it's a difficult juggle to make sure that we can allow people to play both disciplines, especially I think the senior secondary school students who are very competitive in indoor in term 1, but they just sort of finish off their beach season as well through that period.
So that means that and having a look at your 2020 events, unfortunately you've had to postpone at least 3 of them so far with the NZSSVC, so that's the secondary schools one. The Aotearoa Invitational, which sounds like probably the big, is that like your big event, the big sort of professional event of the year? Or
big international, yes.
And then the provincial volleyball championships as well have also unfortunately had to get postponed. So this lockdown is having a big impact on you, not just from a kind of tournament point of view and I guess income point of view.
Absolutely. Obviously, there's no sport going on, so the reality is that we, sport was basically postponed, cancelled 2 weeks out before our major event, New Zealand secondary schools. We have 166 teams, over 2,000 people, so it's a huge event and something that the people look forward to, and it is only postponed, and we are definitely trying to reschedule. That is the beauty. As the indoor sport, we can postpone and reschedule. So we're just working with that at the moment. Obviously, the Year 13s in particular are absolutely keen as mustard to try and get us to offer it again. And I think something that we've learned from this lockdown is I mean, sport is not just sport. It's not just physical exercise. The mental well-being and health of our young people. It's all, working together with the friends that they have and the things that they do and the people they mix with and the experiences that they have. And so essentially, I mean, that is part of the Volleyball New Zealand Secondary Schools volleyball event. It's an event. It's an entertainment. It's an opportunity. It's a gathering of young people. So although the volleyball is important, the whole support mechanism and system for our young people is really important there as well. So, we'd like to think that we can run it so that we can give these Year 13s the opportunity to go out, on a high with a blast, but, through the vehicle and mechanism of sport, but a whole lot of really good things, going down as well. So, and obviously then ricocheting onto that are all the other events that have been, probably more cancelled. And that's the reality, I think, for sport, isn't it? I mean, you can't social distance playing sport 2 meters apart. You can try and work things out, and we'll certainly be trying to do that because everyone's saying they do want to get out and about and participate and engage, and that's what we'll be trying to do for them as well.
Cool. And I guess part of it is also, I've been talking with rugby clubs and rugby from CEOs, and they've been saying that they're having to juggle usage of grounds with sort of cricket and other pieces if they have to overlap into the summer. I guess you're going to have some similar kind of issues around people with, I guess, badminton, perhaps in basketball or netball. You're going to are you working with those other organisations as well around use of facilities?
So for us, I mean, I guess the one good thing is we did virtually finish our secondary school season. So from that point of view, we're not trying to find additional space for these athletes. Our New Zealand secondary schools is it can be a standalone event. I mean, we've got all our seedings. It's just the finale that we're missing. So from that point of view, we're not, absolute competing against other sports. However, we do run, as I said, a winter sport component, so our club volleyball, and so there are a whole lot of people that will be wanting to play that. We already, I guess, compete with, basketball and badminton for that indoor space as well. I think it'll be when we stretch winter and summer sports with sports wanting to go. I didn't get my 2 terms, so I'm going to push that out in the summer sports and go. I mean, as a summer sport as well with our juniors, we only have 6 weeks. So if we have some sports pushing into that 6-week period, which is term 4, then, clearly there are sports at a disadvantage. So, we're all just going to have to play nicely in the sandpit and try and work this one out.
That sounds like an interview I need to get with Sports New Zealand to see how they're going to arbitrage between you all. I mean, sticking with the indoor thing before we head off to start talking about the beach volleyball side of things, but the Olympics also is your big event every 4 years. Is that something that your athletes all sort of put a 4-year cycle around it, a bit like sort of rowing, where you can see it's very much focused on that one event, or do the World Championships and other events have kind of a similar kind of standing within volleyball?
Sure. Unfortunately for New Zealand, we are pretty low in the sort of pecking order of international nations. Volleyball is truly an international sport with, obviously, sort of South America, North America, Europe, Asia being incredibly strong at volleyball. So, our indoor is nowhere near as strong as the rest of the world, or many countries in the rest of the world. So, our focus tends to be the Asian champs, getting some good seedings in there rather than internationally for indoor. And the reality is, you need to have 10, 12 incredible athletes to do well in indoor, whereas you only need 2 in beach volleyball. So New Zealand's, far suited to that than indoor. So, we work hard. We have a lot of athletes, top athletes that go on college scholarships to the state. So, we have some wonderful athletes, but, we never have 12 amazing athletes all at the same time, which is, probably the biggest issue there.
And that's, I guess, that's a big difference between the indoor and the beach volleyball. Indoor, it's 6 aside, isn't it? But you can substitute players in, and that's why hence you need the bigger squad. whereas you say beach volleyball is just two people in a team. So the beach volleyball season, you say obviously it's over the summer. How do you get about sort of finding beach space, or when you try and do you host many tournaments here where you need to put stands on beaches and things like that?
So, I mean, we have just finished probably 3 weeks before lockdown was the Continental Cup. So that was the Olympic qualifier for Oceania, which I'm pleased to say New Zealand took first place, beat Australia, which is fantastic, in the men's. And yes, exactly. and second in the women's. I mean, you know, the men, they are the best in Asia. They had just come back from winning the Asian Champs, and the very best team in Asia qualifies for the Olympics. So that's how close we are for qualifying the Olympics, which is phenomenal when you go back to what I said about how strong the world is, and you can have two teams per nations as well. So, you know, that makes it even more difficult to qualify. So, so the Continental Cup had the Oceania nations, so which includes Australia and New Zealand. Vanuatu are very strong in the women, so they nearly qualified for the previous Olympics. So we did lose to them, but we still have another chance, obviously, next year now to actually qualify. So there are still positions for each confederation to qualify. So we go through Asia and play the very best in Asia to get, you know, through there. So we also run a New Zealand beach tour, so that starts in November. And, you know, this year we went to Mount Maunganui, Gisborne, Nelson, Ruakaka. So, you know, fantastic beaches in New Zealand that we go to. And then we have our top athletes that compete every couple of weeks. These events are held, and we get our national tour champions. So that is our pinnacle New Zealand event. And then sitting under that, we have our domestic beach tour. Our younger athletes and our more social athletes, you know, get to play. And when you talk about beach space, it is difficult. More and more people want to use the beach, and you need to negotiate with, you know, a range of different sports, negotiate with councils. You've got people that want beaches to be kept free of any infrastructure, and then you've got others that go, great, it's entertainment that attracts people to the beach and to our region. So, you know, we have to deal with all of those components, but certainly the New Zealand Beach Tour finals that we ran at Mount Maunganui, you know, we had a grandstand, we had a DJ, we had commentators, we had music, and you know, it looked like you know, a wonderful international event. And you know, when it comes to Olympics and Com Games, the beach volleyball is one of the, you know, earliest to sell out and the most popular. So the reality is there's a great popularity for the sport, and in New Zealand, we just need to keep growing that. You know, we're babies, I guess, you know, in the international scene, and we just need to keep growing the event, and you know, more people coming along and supporting it.
So when you talk about having that the facilities, do you have any permanent beach courts, or is it all or do you have to, are they all temporary courts that have to go up?
So obviously, Volleyball New Zealand itself doesn't own any courts, but we do have, so for example, North Harbour, they use an old bowling club from Maunganui Bay Bowling Club, and that sits perfectly for 6 courts, and you know, it's well supported by council. And we've got a number of other associations around New Zealand. Ideally, bowling clubs are the ones that we're looking at, just because they're a perfect size, and obviously small numbers bowling, and the councils are looking to, you know, reutilize those. So Southland, Hawke's Bay are all looking at utilizing those facilities. So that's ideal, you know, for volleyball, to be able to use that, and then you can have locally run competitions. From Volleyball New Zealand's perspective, we like to get on.
Sorry, just to so hang on. So you're taking an old an area basically that's inland, filling it with sand, and having that as a kind of as a court. Then is that how it kind of works?
That's exactly what it looks like. Yep. So basically, you know, if you drive down Maunganui Bay and stop, you'll just see a fence round, and then you'll look and you'll see all these courts, and you'll see all the sand. And, you know, when the event's pumping, you'll see couches and music, and you'll go, gee, I've been transformed, you know, into some sunny beach. I mean, you know, for example, the US, very popular beach volleyball, but clearly, you know, there are a whole lot of places that have no beaches. So they call it sand volleyball, and there's sand centres and sand clubs, and they do exactly that, you know, just transfer a whole lot of sand in there, and, you know, who would know it, but nowhere near, you know, a beach. Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, yeah, no, so you were going about but you like to host your actual the top level events actually on a real beach.
Yeah, that's right. You know, for several reasons. Number one, because of through traffic, like that's huge. You know, people are more likely to be at the beach rather than down a suburban street. And there's no doubt that when athletes come, despite the fact that there are wonderful, you know, landlocked sand-based centres, there's nothing like the beach and the surf. And certainly when we ran our Continental Cup, you know, those photos and video footage of Mount Maunganui went around the world, and people went, wow, this is one of the most beautiful spots we've been. So, you know, you're just not going to get that in a former bowling club. That's just the reality.
But you are going to get a little clubhouse where you can have a beer afterwards.
You are absolutely right. And that is definitely a viable income stream for associations. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what we need to now do is to talk to Mount Maunganui Council and say, hey, you need to set up a permanent court that people can play on.
No comment from me, but that would be great.
And so as you said that the men have qualified for the Olympics. And again, for beach volleyball, a bit like volleyball, is the Olympics the absolute pinnacle, or are there other kind of world tours or world championships that's considered the sort of the pinnacle for, or the top of the sport for volleyball, for beach volleyball?
Cool. Okay, so I must hold you, they haven't qualified for the Olympics yet.
Oh, sorry.
Believe me, it's they've still got stepping stones. So they won Oceania, and now they go and play the best in Asia. And if they win that, then they definitely make it. However, they beat the best in Asia already, so that's great. And again, the women play the second place teams, and then if they win that, then they play the first place teams. A big, long, you know, convoluted way, but eventually you'll get there. So we also have a world tour in volleyball, and it's very popular. When you win, you financially do well. So that is something that's ongoing, you know, and it's annual, and that's what our top athletes. So probably two to three men's teams, two women's teams. They're on the world tour, or they try to participate in some of the world tour events. Again, you know, they're in Europe, they're far away, some of them, so they're incredibly costly. But if our athletes want to get better, then certainly, you know, the world tour is what they need to participate in. So, you know, huge events, but incredibly costly and difficult to access from the bottom of the world.
Right. So that's mainly because in sort of Rio, the States and Europe is kind of where that's. You don't have a world tour event here in New Zealand?
No, not in New Zealand, but we did have one on the Cook Islands that our men's team won earlier in the year. So, I mean, that's wonderful. That's the first world tour event that we've ever won. Now, when you have world tour events, you have, 1, 2, 3 star events. So this was a 1-star event. So it was the I guess the most non-financial for you,
the entry level of
the lowest winnings, but we did win that, and so that was wonderful. So but generally it is very difficult. There are certainly a number in Asia, and in fact, you know, China holds a lot. So when China was impacted at the peak of the beach volleyball season, then that made it really difficult for people to find events to go to. And even if the Olympics had been on, it would have been difficult for teams down the bottom of the world to actually manage to have played in enough events, because China actually hosted so many and they were all called off. So there are plenty in Asia as well. There's one event in Australia, so it's not too bad, but certainly the number far higher at the northern hemisphere.
Cool. So so it sounds like, you say, having just won the first event, it's something that's growing. It's not just the indoor volleyball that's growing fast, but also the beach volleyball is growing both in quality and in numbers.
Yes, well, we have our New Zealand secondary school champs in February, and we had 221 teams play at that. So if you can imagine, Mount Maunganui Beach, just as far as you can see, north and south, covered in volleyball courts, and that's wonderful. So there are definitely growing numbers of young people that see it as either a summer alternative to their sport, or an off season, or fitness, or a fun thing. And beach volleyball is it has a wonderful social vibe to it as well. So marquee set up, music going, just sort of, well, who can not want to be sort of in the sun, sunscreen and hats and music and cool people and all of that, and that's the vibe that beach volleyball offers to the community. So it's extremely popular as well, but people probably go, I don't have a beach, I can't play. So it's just understanding, in fact, that it can be set up in lots of different environments. Yeah.
And that's from the outside anyway, the culture between indoor volleyball, which I guess looks like a serious, a bit like gymnastics, serious Olympic sport kind of thing, and then you have the beach volleyball, which culturally looks as close as kind of like to surfing and to much more sort of baggy shirts and a much cooler vibe. How do the two sort of mix culturally? I mean, is there any friction, or is there a lot of crossover?
I think there's a lot of crossover. I mean, I think if you go to our New Zealand secondary schools tournament and we've got 2,000 young people, it's probably very similar. There's lots of music and lots of cool people and that sort of thing. Definitely at the top end, I think, of any sport, then it's quite different, and it's probably a little bit more keenly demanding of pressure and time and all of those sorts of things. There are definitely coaches that I'm a beach coach or I'm an indoor coach, and that's one of our jobs, is to go, no, you're volleyball players. The reality is that the skills support each other, and we want our athletes to be able to play both of the disciplines as equally as well. And at some stage, as they leave school, then they may have to choose which one they would like to focus on, but until then, we really want to see them playing both. So you're right, though. There is certainly a slightly different vibe with the beach and that cool hip hop sort of component of it, but the reality is, I think they mix and merge really, really well, and especially for young people, then they're equally fun and cool and places to be, really.
And I think a lot of us sort of the older generation here, we can see my grey beard, is sort of beach volleyball. We first learned about it watching Top Gun and things like that. So I guess one of the things I talked when I was talking with Surfing New Zealand was that they said, when you get a good movie out that's got a bit of surfing in, you get a nice little lift. I think maybe that's what you need to try and do, is get yourself back into. I've not seen the latest Top Gun, but I'm guessing that also had a bit of volleyball in. Did you see a bit of a lift from that, or not really?
Well, funnily enough, I think there was a recent Facebook post about about Top Gun and and volleyball, and I think it might have been birthday wishes or something like that. So I think all of those things, bringing your sport to the fore and letting people know it's there, or reminding them, and then seeing the Com Games and the Olympics and how cool that is and how much fun that is. I think they are all opportunities for sports, but the reality is sport is bigger than some mass media promotion, and really it's just pulling at the core of people and going, what do you want to do? And so therefore, if you want to play, be it social or competitive, you want to play in the beach or indoors or grass, here is an opportunity, and you want to bring your mates, or you want to bring your auntie and uncle or your kids, you can do that as well. So I think starting people in sport but keeping them in sport is definitely a little bit broader than that promotion of it. But anything, for volleyball, someone that when we don't get anything on TV, then definitely because can't be choosers, and we take every opportunity to to promote and see the sport. Yeah.
Now, looking at you say about getting those people engaged and how about it's about grabbing people in. Looking at your CV, or at least what it says on LinkedIn, you're a career sports administrator kind of person. Started off with netball as a netball development officer so going around and getting kids involved with or people involved with that, and that's how you could have come into this kind of role.
Yes, I sort of feel that each of the jobs I've done before have led me on to what I then did. So first of all, I was a teacher, history, geography, outdoor education teacher. And then I went, let me out, and certainly then worked for Netball New Zealand as a development officer, and it was mostly a coaching role, and to have people thank you sincerely for doing coach development and wanting to learn and being enthusiastic was just amazing. It's like, wow, this is great. And then I went on to running an outdoor education centre, worked in a community organisation for young people at risk of serious offending, then on to Harbour Sport, where I spent quite a bit of time. And again, community development and looking at encouraging people into all sorts of sports, but just being active, was awesome. But to take all of those skills that I've had in the previous roles and then to put them into volleyball and to actually go, we can actually see what we do, we can look at the numbers, we can see how people are engaging, staying in our sport, we can see the programs that we offer and those that are participating. So and as I said, knowing that it's the sleeping giant, knowing that when so many sports are falling away and numbers are dropping, volleyball continues to grow, and yet we're not even really doing much because we're just a really skinny small organization. But imagine what we can do, having high numbers of Māori, Pacifica and females playing volleyball and going, that's the target audience, that they are the groups of people that we want to engage more in sports. So how can we do that? How can we sort of help turn this nation around mentally, physically, health wise, and what can volleyball do and how can we be a vehicle for that? So what wonderful opportunities I saw to be able to put all of those things, into the sport.
So waking this giant, what is your what's your 5-year goal? If in 5 years' time you say, right, I'll know I've been successful in waking this giant. What have you got what was as the chairman or whatever giving you or the board giving you a kind of a target for 5 years' time, or however many? Yes. We
don't so much as have numerical targets, but certainly, being a leading participation sport in New Zealand, certainly increasing the numbers of young people, especially Māori, Pacifica, female, engaging the sport, staying in the sport. For our stakeholders and community to go, we see value in your organisation. I think, they are some of the components that we look at. I mean, there's nothing worse than people going, I don't want to pay my affiliation fee because I don't see any value from you. And I think, I can say, oh, fair enough. But I'm hoping that in 2 or 3 years' time, you go, actually, I'm willing to give you my $20 because you have provided this program, this support, open that pathway. We've been able to engage here. So it's adding value to the people that participate in our sport, adding value to, the associations that we connect with closely and going, yes, we actually need you and we value the work that you're doing. So, that's sort of key to us to actually making a difference. But there's no doubt that at the, people level, we want more people participating in the game. We want people to turn to volleyball as their sport of choice and go, this is fantastic. This is great. This is so much fun. We know that young people want to participate in sport that's fun. So for us, it's making sure that we then share as much of our knowledge and information with the associations and clubs and schools to make sure that volleyball is fun. We don't want the kids to be turned off it. We don't want them to go, that was so boring. We spend a lot of our time, when we look at our events and competitions going, what do the kids want? what's cool. And like I said to you, it's not just the sport that's important, it's all the other things. What are the activities that we offer at an event and a competition? What are the cool things they get to do with other kids they only see, twice or 3 times a year from another school, but they've seen them for the last 5 years, at this event sort of thing. So, that's really important for us, is just to ask the people that play the game, what do they want and what will keep them in the game. So I think, for a sport to be successful, they've just got to keep communicating with particularly the young people to see what they want and actually adapting and changing so it suits them. Even this morning we were talking about a skills program, and it's like, well, hang on, why have we got a heavy skills program when we know kids just want to play? If you've ever been coaching, it's like, when do we play? When do we play? Oh, no, I'm trying to teach you this. Well, frankly, they want to play. You're going to have to work out teaching them skills within their play, so it's just adapting and listening and learning. And I think that will bring, volleyball through the other end as a successful sport.
So talking about it being more than just sport and being around it, how are you communicating with your with the players, with the athletes now, or with the clubs during this lockdown? Are you running various social media kind of competitions or what's I'm looking for, challenges to keep everyone engaged during this time?
Absolutely. So, first 5 days sort of panic of what should we do? So, and as I've talked about sort of the health and well-being of our young people, that was critical for us. So we've set up virtual VNZ, mental skills Monday, technique Tuesday, well-being Wednesday. And so that was what was really important, as well as the well-being of our young people and their mental health and skills, just to be able to cope. And obviously, first 2 weeks is a novelty and it's fun. 6 weeks, maybe not quite so. So just being able to, get them in just short and sharp, but giving them support and having them understand there are other people doing the same thing. But also then, with fitness and technique and, those components to help them, they can go out and actually do some volleyball by themselves, around their house or whatever. We also picked up several challenges. So, toilet paper, obviously, that rare, expensive commodity that we have. So we had some wonderful sort of, volleyball challenges with using the toilet roll, and also some team challenges, seeing as, we were in lockdown when New Zealand secondary schools was on. So we got some of the teams to use the toilet roll and to, serve it or pass it or hit it to their other players, locked down as well. So that was great. And the other things, I think that everyone goes, okay, it's not too bad. We can sort of work with each other. We can talk. We can have fun. So, yeah, social media, huge presence, huge role to play just to communicate and update, both cajoling people and supporting them, as well as, giving information. The alert levels will become really important as to when we can go back to volleyball, and we will use social media. We will use, every mechanism possible to update people on what they can do, what they really shouldn't do, what's advisable, because, clearly we want to be a leader in making sure that we're doing the right things, that we don't go too soon. But at the same time, when we are able to play, let's get out there and play.
Cool. And so where can people find all these Wellbeing Wednesdays and Tips Tuesdays? Was it? Or Technique Tuesdays, sorry.
Technique Tuesday, yeah. Career Thursday, Fitness Friday.
So where can people find all those?
Sure. So on our website, Volleyball New Zealand website, on our Instagram, obviously for people way younger than me that use that, and then on our website as well, Volleyball New Zealand. So yeah, certainly search all of those places, and you'll find lots of information, lots of fun games and activities. And I think, if you're a parent, then there's great activities for you to help your kids with. And if you're a kid, then you can definitely, engage yourself and, use that information for your own either improvement or just to start the game and have a go.
So if you're listening to the podcast, it's in the podcast notes, all those links. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, the links are down below in the comments, so you can get to all of that information. thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure learning about the world of volleyball. Any final things I haven't touched on that we should let the folks know about?
I think, the only thing is, we were Commonwealth Games bronze medalists at the last, Com Games, which was the first time that beach volleyball had been brought into the Com Games for some time. So, there's definitely a future either as a social player or as an international competitive player. That's the beauty of the game. And as I say, indoor and beach. So, certainly come along, have a go. Take it up. It's a great sport, summer and winter. So, it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. And for everyone who's watching, thank you very much. Don't forget to like the page or subscribe to the podcast. In this series, I've also talked to Surfing New Zealand, Bowls New Zealand, Waikato Armour as well. So I'm getting through as many of the different sports as I can. Try and go back and have a listen to those if those would interest you.